Rain hammered the canvas tents like war drums. Cass Calder crouched behind the lion wagon, revolver in hand, breath hitching in the powder smoke air. The storm lit up, rusted cages and faces twisted in panic. Inside the main tent, the ringmaster's voice boomed false promises, but Cass had seen the truth, saw it in the chains, the hidden crates, the men in grey waiting near the freight car. Performers screamed as the storm peeled back canvas like old scabs. She wasn't a showgirl anymore. She was a weapon. The ringmaster was selling her family, acrobats, fire-eaters, the mute strongman who taught her how to shoot. Cass wiped rain from her sights. No more running. Tonight, she'd make every bullet count. Elijah Cray watched the chaos unfold from beneath the striped maw of the big top. Lightning cut the prairie wide, and in that white flash, he saw the truth. Cages, chains, cowards with coin. He'd seen this before in darker uniforms and different flags. He thought he'd left that war behind, but injustice had a way of wearing new costumes. His hands, gnarled and steady, fed shells into a battered Sharp's rifle. The fools didn't know who they were dealing with. They thought him just another sideshow relic, Buffalo Elijah, the iron-backed man. But beneath the costume was a soldier. And when soldiers see slavery dressed up in spectacle, they don't ask for permission to burn it down. They found each other in the shadow of the fortune-teller's wagon. Cass pressed bullets into Elijah's calloused hand without a word. He nodded once. No time for speeches. The wind howled like a dying beast, snapping guy lines and toppling banners. "They're loading cages onto the west rail," Cass shouted over the gale. Elijah chambered around. "Then we flank from the cookhouse, smoke and elevation." She smirked, storm in her eyes. "Still got fight in you, old man." He gave her a look sharp enough to cut rope, enough to see this circus buried and its devils with it. Together, they vanished into the chaos, a broken girl and a tired soldier, both done with taking orders, and ready to deal justice at the barrel's end. Inside the cookhouse, rain leaked through holes in the tin roof, drumming a steady rhythm on the battered stove. Elijah knelt by the broken window, rifle barrel steady, scanning the rutted path where the slavers moved cages toward the freight car. Cass stood behind him, breath ragged, one hand wiping mud from her Colt's grip. Below them, men in top hats barked orders while torchlight danced off wet crates. "Two on the left," Elijah muttered. "More coming from the elephant paddock," Cass clicked her tongue. "We need a distraction." Elijah looked at the spilled grease near the stove and gave a rare, grim smile. Smoke rises, fire shouts. With practiced hands, he ripped a curtain down and lit it with a coal, then tossed it over the oil. The cookhouse screamed into flame. Chaos had arrived, and they would ride it like cavalry. The fire spread fast, snapping canvas like angry whips, thick smoke spiraling into the night. Slavers scattered, blinded by the blaze and deafened by the roar. Cass burst from the shadows atop a crate, gun blazing skyward. "Step away from the cages," she shouted. Her voice cut through the storm. Elijah came behind her, bayonet flashing, knocking a rifle from a guard's hands and leveling him with the buttstock. Screams echoed across the midway, real ones this time, not the kind sold for applause. The firelight flickered over rusted iron bars and terrified faces. One by one, performers broke free, chains clattering to the mud. The circus was no longer an act. It was a rebellion, and its stars were armed. Ringmaster Delancey stood above the melee like a vulture made of velvet, long coat soaked and gleaming with rain. A bowie knife danced in his hand as he barked orders to the remaining mercenaries. "Shut those gates. Shoot anyone with paint on their face." But the crowd didn't scatter. They circled. Acrobats wielded rigging hooks. The fire breather held a torch like a spear, and the strongman, his chains now broken, stared at Delancey like he meant to crush him with bare hands. "You sold us," someone said. Delancey raised his knife. "You were always mine to sell." From the shadows, a rifle cracked. The knife spun from his grip, clanging off the wagon roof. Elijah stepped into view, smoke curling from the muzzle. "Not anymore," he said, and the circus moved in to finish what he'd started. The wind howled like a beast finally freed from its cage, toppling the trapeze tent in a shower of sparks and canvas. Cass sprinted through the smoke, boots slick with mud and blood, dragging the wounded aerialist by the arm. The woman's ankle was shattered, her face smeared with soot. Behind them, a burning support pole crashed to the earth. Cass didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on a clearing by the fortune wagon, where a knot of freed performers waited under Storm Street tarps. The air reeked of gunpowder and scorched sawdust. Somewhere nearby, a lion roared, loose now, uncaged like them all. Cass dropped to her knees beside the acrobat. "You're safe now," she whispered, more prayer than promise. But they still had one last devil to kill. Elijah found them retreating through the stock pens. 4 men with pistols, soaked and frantic, slapping at frightened horses. "Drop it, old man," one barked. Elijah didn't blink. "You're standing in a grave you ain't earned yet." Thunder rolled as he leveled his rifle. One of them ran. The others hesitated, then followed. Cowards never had a second charge in them. He lowered the barrel, shoulders sagging beneath the wet weight of his coat. Every bone ached. Every ghost he'd buried stirred. But this fight, this cause, had meaning. The people behind him weren't just survivors. They were witnesses. And if he had to die in the muck for their freedom, he'd do it with steel in his spine and fire in his hands. Delancey lay slumped at the base of his prize wagon, wrists bound in rigging rope, lips split, eyes swelling shut. Rainwater ran in rivulets through the mud, mixing with his blood. Cass stood over him, revolver lowered but not holstered. Elijah beside her, breathing slow and ragged. "You sold children," Cass said. Her voice cracked like lightning, soft and final. Delancey tried to smirk, couldn't. "Business is business," he wheezed. Elijah knelt beside him. "Not anymore." He pulled a badge from inside his coat, an old military marshal star, tarnished but real, and pressed it against Delancey's temple. "By the authority of the people you tried to sell, you're done." Cass turned away, eyes stinging, the storm finally beginning to pass. No applause, just justice. Dawn crawled over the torn-up prairie like a reluctant witness. Smoke still curled from the wreckage of wagons, the scent of scorched paint and canvas riding the breeze. Performers huddled in blankets, dazed but free, some staring at the horizon, others clasping hands with people they once thought lost. Cass moved through them like a ghost, checking wounds, muttering comfort, her revolver finally holstered. Elijah stood apart, rifle grounded, eyes scanning the empty ridgeline. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. Not until he saw every last threat ride out or fall down. The circus was dead. But something new had taken root, too raw to name, too fragile to speak. A chance. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself the breath of it. Laughter crackled like firewood as the freed performers passed around tins of stew. The fire threw orange halos across their faces, paint smudged, eyes swollen but alive. Cass sat on a crate at the edge of the light, polishing her Colt with slow, methodical care. She didn't join the stories, but she listened. The bearded lady wept quietly into a clown's shoulder. The fire breather offered a toast. To the girl who shoots straighter than fate. Cheers rose, then died softly into silence. Cass looked up, gave a half smile. "Don't thank me," she said. Thank the man who aimed me in the right direction. She looked across the fire. Elijah nodded once, said nothing. Some debts were bigger than words. The ground where the circus stood was a blackened scar. Tents gone. Wagons ash. Chains buried. Cass and Elijah stood side by side on the ridge, looking east where Dodge City shimmered in the heat haze. "They'll need to know what happened here," she said. He nodded. "And someone's got to make sure it doesn't happen again." The silence between them was heavy, but clean, like fresh bandages over old wounds. Cass holstered her revolver, slid a battered deck of circus cards into her coat. "What now?" she asked. Elijah adjusted the strap on his rifle. "We ride. Help where we can. Make noise when it counts." The sun crested behind them, casting long shadows. 2 outcasts. 1 mission. No curtain call. Just the road ahead. Cass rode like she was born to the saddle, prairie wind snapping her faded circus coat behind her. The land stretched forever in every direction. No banners, no cages, just sun and wild grass. She scanned the horizon, not for threats, but for signs of the next wrong needing to be righted. Her revolver rode at her hip like a promise. In her saddlebag were names, performers still missing, towns that bought secrets with silence. She'd stopped being a sideshow act the night fire lit the tents. Now she was something else. A force. And if the next town was rotten too, she'd give them a performance worth dying for. Elijah built the fire low, feeding it twigs with the patience of a man who'd waited decades to be useful again. He watched Cass in the distance, checking her sidearm, tension still wound in her shoulders. She was younger, faster, louder. But where she burned, he anchored. Where she stormed, he steadied. He ran his cloth down the bayonet, its steel still marked from the ringmaster's men. Every groove told a truth. Justice has no uniform, and war never ends. It just changes faces. He wasn't chasing peace anymore. He was carrying it, rifle in hand, 1 mile at a time. The wind picked up as they approached the town, a half-rotted sign swinging on rusted chains. "Welcome to Perdition Flats." The letters were bullet-pocked. A warning or a welcome. Cass pulled her horse beside Elijah's. Neither said a word. They didn't need to. The clouds gathering behind them were thick with dust and thunder. Another storm was coming. Another town. Another fight. Elijah rolled his neck. Cass checked her rounds. Together, they rode in, not as performers, not as fugitives, but as avengers in a land where justice came late and always smoking. The show wasn't over. It had just changed venues. The saloon went silent the second their boots hit the floor. Card games froze mid-deal. Glasses hovered half-raised. A gust of wind slammed the doors shut behind them, lightning painting their silhouettes like ghosts. Cass stepped forward first, revolver still holstered, but hand resting on the grip. Elijah stayed 1 pace behind, tall, silent, unshakable. A man near the bar reached slowly for a shotgun under the counter, until Cass shook her head once. Slow, deadly. She scanned the room and found what she needed. Fear and guilt. "We're not here for drinks," she said. "We're here for names." Elijah's voice followed, low and final. "And if we don't get we'll carve truth out of whoever's still breathing by sunrise." The sheriff's office smelled like tobacco, sweat, and cowardice. Sheriff Baines barely looked up as Cass entered, her coat dripping with prairie grit. Elijah shut the door behind them. "You've got a problem," Cass said, tossing a weathered ledger onto the desk, ink smeared, stained with blood. The sheriff glanced at it, then at them. "That's not my jurisdiction," he muttered. Elijah stepped forward, slammed his palm flat on the desk. The lamp rattled. It is now. Baines swallowed hard. The ledger told everything. Names, dates, the next shipment of performers scheduled to vanish by week's end. Cass leaned in. You're either part of this cleanup or part of the mess. Your choice, Sheriff. Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, the law changed hands. Dawn broke over Perdition Flats as Cass and Elijah rode west, saddle creaking, dust rising behind them. On the edge of town, a circus poster fluttered in the wind, faded red letters, a smiling ringmaster's face already torn by rain. Cass didn't look back. Elijah lit a cigar and let it hang in silence. They'd left behind another corrupt system cracked open, another group of innocents spared the worst. But there were more towns, more names. The ledger in Cass's coat pocket weighed heavier than any gun, and until every last line was crossed out, neither of them could stop. The circus hadn't ended. It had simply